What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the New Mutants. It is so good to know that this movie's finally released in theaters. This movie, if you guys do not already know, has been delayed an amazing amount of times, honestly. I remember this movie being announced in the production beginning around the same time that Batman vs. Superman was in production, and look at how much has happened since then, how many movies have been released since then. Since then, Disney has purchased Fox, and the X-Men timeline is going to be rebooted, and it's just crazy to see how much has happened since this movie went into production, and now it has finally been released in theaters, one of the earlier releases in this whole new movies during the pandemic thing. And yeah, did I like it? Yeah, I had a good time with it. I found this movie to be a pretty good time. Now, for those of you who have no idea what this is about, this is essentially supposed to be a horror X-Men type of film. Obviously, it's called the New Mutants, so there's mutants in the film. And yeah, right out of the gate, just the premise and some of the early promotional material definitely had me excited. I was definitely interested to see this movie. You have a really great cast in this film with people like Maisie Williams, Anya Taylor-Joy, Charlie Heaton, and so many others. And right out of the gate, what I really enjoyed about this film was the overall tone, feel, and vibe of the film. Now, the movie is not fantastic or anything. It's not the best X-Men film or anything like that, but it was a good time to be able to be back in theaters watching a Marvel-related film. And yeah, I really enjoyed the tone of this film. It's nice to see like a horror vibe, X-Men kind of film. Visually, the movie was really cool. Some of the CG is a little cartoony at times, but I feel like it fits the overall visual of the film. The performances in the film were really believable, and I really enjoyed all the actors in this film. Some of the moments of dialogue or just a couple of moments of performance aren't absolutely perfect, but the movie itself, I found it to be a good time. I was visually engaged in what was happening, and I was engaged in the story, and I was kind of having a good time with it. So the basic premise of this film is you have the character of Danielle Moonstar, who's waking up in this asylum of sorts where she's now with these other mutants. There's 5 of them all together, including her, and she's very confused as to what just happened. She had some sort of traumatic experience at the beginning of the movie where her father is saving her from some sort of tornado or some sort of creature. She doesn't know what it is, and I don't want to get into any spoilers here in this video, but yeah, she ends up waking up and finding out that everybody died, including her family, and that she's the only person who survived. And she ends up waking up in an asylum of sorts and is told by the doctor who's watching over all of these mutants, including her, and the doctor herself is a mutant as well. She's telling her that she's there to kind of keep an eye on the new mutants, being able to help them find their powers and find control over their powers. There's an analogy somewhere in the film where they talk about how a younger rattlesnake is actually more dangerous than an older rattlesnake because the younger ones don't know how much venom to put out when they bite onto something. So the idea was that with new mutants, they don't know how to control their powers, so they're very, very dangerous. And I enjoyed the premise right out of the gate. You have these characters that are in this asylum. There's something about it that feels like they don't know who or what to trust. And I enjoyed that about the film, is that there's a lot of characters in the film that are kind of assholes, and you don't really know who you can trust, who you should like, who you should kind of follow or be a part of in your heart. And I enjoyed that about the film. It kind of leaves you kind of wondering who are the good characters in the movie. And throughout it, there are some things that are reveals. And this isn't a movie that I shouldn't paint this movie in any way that it's some sort of like mind-blowing, there's a big bunch of twists and turns. It's not that kind of movie. There is a predictable element to it, but I found it to be a good time. And I think that this movie is going to get a bad rap from a lot of people who feel like they know what this movie should have been, or they've heard the fact that it was delayed, or reshoots were supposed to happen and all that jazz, and people are just going to dig into it for that. I think that there's gonna be a percentage of the audience who goes to watch this who got way too much hype in their head for what this movie actually is. When I saw the trailers for this movie and I saw the marketing in general, I knew that this was just gonna be a very tame comic book movie in comparison. Now, the third act of this film is actually pretty fun. There's a lot of really cool action, and I think my biggest gripe about this film was how dark it was at times. There were some slower moments in the film, and there were some things like in some of the dialogue that wasn't perfect, but for the most part, I found it to be an engaging ride, and outside of the slow moments, I was entertained by the film throughout, which is the only thing I could really ask. I think the worst thing a movie can be is boring, and I was never bored watching it. Visually, there's some cool things. There are some creepy and eerie elements. It's not necessarily scary, but this is a movie, like I was just mentioning, I kind of lost my train of thought, that I feel is going to get more shit than it deserves, because I think some people are going to go into it maybe expecting more than I feel the marketing ever promised, and just because it was delayed so much and because of the fact that there was this conversation around it, some people are just going to automatically hate on this movie for not really being a huge over-the-top comic book movie. You actually don't see a lot of the characters use their superpowers very much until the third act of the film. Throughout the movie, there are small little moments where some of them use their abilities, or you kind of get a small showcase of what they can do, but it really isn't until the third act of the film that you really get into the meat and potatoes of these characters' powers. And it's really cool. I really enjoyed the visual style of this film. I really enjoyed seeing these characters all together, and this was a nice, fun, kind of refreshing watch for me, because I've been a comic book fan my entire life. I've been reading comic books my entire life, and it's something that I'm very, very well versed in. So every time a new comic book movie comes out, I remember when the Guardians of the Galaxy came out, and I was incredibly excited, but so many people didn't know what those characters were, who those characters were, and I already knew who they were, so I was really excited to see them brought to the big screen. And a lot of times I already know where a lot of the films are going to go, or where they're going to take the characters. If they do something where they kind of hint at something in a post-credit scene, I typically am already able to catch on to these things. So with the New Mutants, I knew who all these individual characters were, and there's small appearances or their big appearances here and there in other X-Men related things, but I really have never really read too many of the New Mutants comics. I've read maybe a handful of them, but I wasn't too aware of what this story would be about. And as I watched it, it was just a nice, refreshing watch. They had nice little Easter eggs and hints and nods at other things that are bigger problems or bigger pieces to the overall X-Men universe. And yeah, this movie for me was a good time. I wasn't absolutely blown away by it. I thought it was visually cool. I had a good time with the action and these characters. There were some slow moments, and it's a film that I found it to be a good time to be back in the theaters watching. But I remember right at the very end of the movie, I actually saw the guy sitting right in front of me. I wasn't trying to snoop, but he was typing on Snapchat with really big letters, and he was posting something for everybody that follows him about the movie, where literally it just said like, well, New Mutants was a movie. It sure was a movie. I've always hated that criticism of things where it's like, well, that sure was a movie. It's like, yes, it was a movie. That's not even a genuine criticism. You could tell with the rest of what he was typing that he was ready to start shitting on the movie. And I can already tell that some people are going to have that mentality on the film. I found it to be a good time. I think that if you are looking for a different kind of comic book film, a different kind of X-Men film, there's definitely something cool here in this film. It's not absolutely mind-blowing, and there are some predictable elements, but I think it was just an entertaining, fun, engaging film. I think there's some really cool elements in there, and as a fan of comic book movies, as a fan of Marvel, I walked out with a smile. So I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Leave those comments down below. Have you seen this movie yet? Are you interested in checking this movie out? I'm very, very happy to be back in theaters watching Marvel-related films. It's a good time to be a movie fan as usual, because there's just so many comic book movies nowadays, and I live for this kind of stuff. So a big thanks to you guys for watching. Leave your comments down below if you've seen this movie, and if you haven't seen this movie, again, are you guys interested in checking it out? Hit that like button down below. Like I mentioned, it will help the channel out. Subscribe if you guys have not already done so, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.